deal. And we had people with financial difficulties where amazing windfalls came just when they needed them for just the right amount. We had people with who were stagnant in their careers get exciting new careers, and all kinds of stuff like that. But we also had people who weren't getting anywhere. And to those people, after a while, after trying some things with them, I finally just said, like with Andy. Andy was trying to get a new job, was divorcing her husband and had 2 small children, needed new work, very talented in marketing and coaching, but just couldn't get a job, no matter what she tried. So finally I just got frustrated, and I said to her, "Oh, Andy, get off of yourself. Just start intending for somebody else that needs more." And so she did, and the moment she did, that following week she gets a call out of nowhere from someone she doesn't even know, offering her a dream job. And that also happened over and over and over again. So out of those 250, 150 continue to meet week by week by week. And of those 150, pretty much 100% had major life transformations, beyond and above the evolution of things over time.
Right.
So that was one scientific, it was an anecdotal study in a way.
Well, yeah, kind of, but it's a first step forward. And I know you. I know things we'll get more results, I'm sure. It's just the beginning. Absolutely. Well, the other big scientific study that was an important first step, it was small, but it was important, was Life University, which is the largest chiropractic university in the world. Were interested in the Power of 8 groups, and they put their neuroscience department at my disposal and said, "Here, you can run studies with them." And I went, "Oh, wow." And so I worked with a neuroscientist who knew nothing about Power of 8 groups. And we set up a study using 6 groups made up of student volunteers who had never done Power of 8 groups before. And we put an EEG cap on one of the members of the group, a sender each time, not a recipient, to see what happened to their brainwaves. And the EEG cap measures different brainwave frequencies. And so what we found was almost immediately, and remember, people were only getting together and intending together for 10 minutes. Right.
Almost immediately, there would be a global lowering of those parts of the brain, like the parietal lobes, which sit toward the back of the head on each side, that are involved in helping us navigate through space. The parietal lobes say, "This is me, this is not me," kind of thing. They were dialed way down. And so were the parts of the brain, like the right frontal lobes, that are involved with worry, doubt, negativity. All of that was turned way down. And other parts that are also involved in a feeling of separation, all turned way down. So these were people in a state of essentially of ecstatic oneness. And they were brainwave signatures, I was fascinated to learn, that were virtually identical to ones registered by Dr. Andrew Newberg, formerly of the University of Pennsylvania, when he did studies of Buddhist monks in prayer, in deep prayer, or Sufi masters during chanting. Again, my Power of 8 groups were virtually identical brainwave signatures. But here's the difference, of course. The difference is, of course, that those people, Buddhist monks, Sufi masters, take years of disciplined practice, and also oftentimes need, an hour or so of priming to get into that state. My guys were total novices. Most of them hadn't even meditated before, and all they had to instruct them was a 12-minute video from me giving them the rudimentaries of a Power of 8 group. And yet they were transported into this extraordinary state in an instant. And so it was, for me, the real conclusion was, you don't need sweat lodges, you don't need, years of disciplined practice or getting on your knees, or doing this or doing that. All you need is a group and a common intention. And, it's a fast track to the miraculous.
I love it. Now let's talk about the group size, because I'm, of course, as usual, I'm telling most of the people I know, including my clients, my readers, people that write to me about your work. And one thing that's come up a lot is people ask me, how big a group do they absolutely need? Does it have to be 8? And I'd love you to address it. I know you talk about it in Power of 8, but could you answer that?
Yeah, sure. It doesn't have to be 8. Remember, I stumbled on this. I'm sitting there trying to think about what to do with these workshops in 2008, and I turned to my husband and I say, I don't know, maybe I'll put them in groups of 8 or so and have them send healing intention to a member of the group with a health challenge. And Brian, who's other journalist and also a great headline writer, turned to me and said, yeah, I love it, the Power of 8. And that is literally how it started. What we have noticed now with all of this time and attention and study is that 8 is like a Goldilocks figure. It's not too small and it's not too big, but I would say that you probably need more than about 4, 4 or more, and probably 12 or less. Anything more than that, it gets a little unwieldy. Anything less than 4, and you don't really have a group. But I've had people who have experienced a group together, and then maybe only 2 or 3, only 3 were able to meet, and they still had power. They still had power because I think they'd already created a kind of resonance among the group. But I think ideally it's, somewhere between 5 and about, 4, 5, and 12.
Excellent. And does participating in this practice require people have to come in holding any certain set of beliefs at all that you've noticed? Is there anything that
No.
Helps? Okay.
No. I mean, when I've run it, like at conferences or whatever, I've had people who come in and say, I was a real skeptic and I got healed. People who had serious issues. I had one woman who wasn't going to come. She had dislocated her arm. And during the intention, she felt her arm slot back into place. And all of the pain she was suffering disappeared. So I've seen it over and over of pure skeptics. I write about in my book about a young boy called Luke who was 15. His stepfather wrote me in that Luke had broken up with his first serious girlfriend, and in a fit of adolescent existential angst, he had thrown himself off a 40-foot structure onto hard ground. And, Luke broke everything in his body. He broke all his bones. He had nerve damage. He had brain damage, and the doctors didn't think he was going to live. So I asked this very same year-long intention group to do a weekly vigil for Luke, a weekly intention for him. And his stepfather was alerted, who kept a running commentary of exactly what was going on with Luke at the time and after we sent intentions. And his amazing progress seemed to completely track the times we were sending intention. And Luke got out of the hospital in record time. So maybe, and everything healed, maybe he, that was great doctoring, or maybe it was us. But one thing it wasn't was a placebo effect, because Luke was, like most adolescent boys and adolescent kids in general, thought that his parents' belief in the power of intention was pretty stupid.
Right. That's a great example. And people should definitely read your book to get all of that, as well as the tips on how to put these groups together. But I want to ask about how your book, Power of 8, ties in the power of prayer from the Bible, as well as meditative practices such as transcendental meditation. And what do these examples have in common, if anything?
Okay, well, great story, great question. First of all, the Power of 8 doesn't have a lot to do with meditation. It starts out with what feels like a slight meditative exercise in, breathing together and holding hands, etc. But soon deviates from that, because one thing I noticed in studying a lot of the science and also the practices of intention masters like Buddhist monks and master healers is when you're using intention as opposed to prayer or meditation, it's not a quiet practice. It's a practice of energizing your mind to be extremely focused with all of your 5 senses. So that's one big difference. And it showed up on our brainwave studies with Life University, the brainwave signatures differed markedly from brainwave signatures in meditation studies. Meditation studies, there still is a kind of an I present, whereas in the Power of 8 groups, that I gets merged into the group. And there is that feeling of complete lack of separation. That seems to be different, qualitatively different. On prayer, here's an interesting thing. Generally, prayer is different from intention in that prayer oftentimes is a supplicant and a supplication. It's basically saying, God, you decide, thy will be done. Whereas intention is a very deliberate request made to the universe. However, when I told you I was looking for an antecedent, who did this before me? Somebody did. I was fascinated to find a little-known sermon by a Baptist minister who was essentially saying the Bible had been mistranslated. And he was talking about the Acts, the portion of the Bible where Jesus has already been crucified, and the apostles are starting to set up the fledgling church. Now, they're all talking about his teachings in there. And one thing that they describe over and over again is how he taught them to pray, and this is the way it's translated in the King James Version, the one we all have in English. He taught them to pray with one accord. But the Baptist minister, Charles Spurgeon, was basically saying this is a mistranslation of the original Hellenic Greek, which was essentially using an adverb to describe their method of prayer as homothumadon. And that word is a musical term, which essentially means passionately and with one voice. Think of a Beethoven symphony where all those instruments come together for a collective sound. And that's exactly what he was really describing. And in the Acts, repeatedly says, you essentially pray this way and you will heal and you will be healed.
And he mentioned 12 times in the Bible, as you point out. So this comes up a lot, this word home, and I don't remember seeing it. Homothumadon, the word, is actually in the Bible 12 times.
Yeah, well, in the original Greek, Hellenic Greek.
Gotcha.
And it's been translated now to be with one accord, which is a very anemic way of saying homothumadon, because, it's versus passionately and with one voice, not with one accord. Just sounds like, we all voted on it,
Right.
So it's a really different concept, and it's one about, speaking with a single voice, passionately with one voice. And as you see, they traveled together, they prayed together, they tried to heal together, and when they were first setting up the church, they got 120 people together, and they all prayed with one voice. So it was the method of prayer. It was supposed to be prayer in a group. And of course it got me thinking, there was a big move by the apostles to replace Judas after he hung himself, to get their 12th member again, and maybe there was something in the power of 12. It's always been thought that they were supposed to represent the 12 tribes of Israel, but maybe there was something else fundamental in the way they were supposed to pray, and the number mattered.
You did look into prehistoric and ancient group intention communities going far back in time, and love to hear what you found there.
I found circles were important. Of course, I looked into and talked to anthropologists with Stonehenge, and what they discover, more recent anthropologists, is that Stonehenge, far from being, an ancient calendar, has been suggested, was originally a cemetery, and then it became like an ancient Lourdes. People who were ill came there to be made well. So they knew that the placement of the stones was really important because they were all dragged, many kilometers away to be placed in that specific way. But they didn't know whether the people were also important and whether or not they were configured in a circle. And many of the people I spoke to, Jeff Levin, who is a real expert in esoteric healing practices, religious healing